Good evening. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. On the big story tonight, NASA principals have their security detail withdrawn on a day that the opposition coalition staged a nationwide protest against the IEBC.
We are equally dismayed by the decision by Jubilee to withdraw the security detail assigned to our presidential candidate, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and his running mate, His Excellency Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka. This is a dangerous precedent in bad taste, and we want to tell President Uhuru Kenyatta that should anything happen to any of our principals, we shall lay the blame squarely on his shoulders.
That is our big story tonight on the show. Over the next hour, we'll be discussing this. I will be having Opio Wandai, who's a member of parliament for Ugunja. We'll also have Raphael Tuju, who's the Secretary General of the Jubilee Party. And as always, our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, who joins me now from the city center here in Nairobi. She, of course, will be speaking with government spokesman Eric Kiraithe and the police tonight, saying that they're reviewing security officers' deployment to take care of a nationwide shortage. Sophia Wanuna starts us off on the show tonight. Before we even get into the reaction from the government spokesman, Sophia, lay the land for us in terms of today's events.
A lot happening today. Yvonne, a very good evening to you. Those reports from the National Super Alliance leadership that their security details have been withdrawn, and we'll be getting insights from that from the government spokesperson tonight. But let's first start by listening to John Mbadi, who's the chairman of the Orange Democratic Movement, and what he had to say in as far as that allegation from NASA is concerned.
24 hours to return our leaders' security or face mass action right at their doorstep.
All right, John Mbadi there talking about the security officers being withdrawn, security for very important persons, VIPs, and in this particular case, principals of the National Super Alliance. And he went further to talk about mass demonstrations, and we'll hear shortly what he had to say. But allow me to engage on that particular note. The government spokesperson, Eric Kiraithe, thank you so much for inviting us to your office tonight. So the National Super Alliance saying government has withdrawn their security officers. Is this correct?
I think there is something not working right there. I don't want to engage myself in the gimmicks politicians use to excite their supporters. The government has very clear policies. The custodian is the Inspector General of Police on provision of security. And I have checked again this evening. And I can assure you, if you go to their gates tonight, you'll see armed members of the National Police Service there. There is a policy, there are procedures on the management and administration of that particular government service. There are very clear regulations about it. And if for any reason they are not satisfied, or they want something enhanced, or they want a certain type of security, there is always a leeway between their advisors and the members of the national security institutions to sit down and agree on the rationale.
So the allegation here is not for the security at home. That we understand is intact. It's those that are with them, accompanying them on their day-to-day activities. And also keeping in mind, this is a presidential candidate and a running mate, and we know ahead of an election, security would usually be beefed up. So talk to us about that, because there are officials in Vigilance House who say there's a scaling back of VIP protection. You're saying there is no such thing.
What I am saying is that there is no scaling back or scaling up or anything. I want to assure Kenyans that as presidential candidate and deputy presidential candidate, Honorable Raila Odinga and Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka are very secure. They will be secure to the voting day and beyond. The actual technicalities, the tactics used, the exact numbers are not things you can go on camera tonight and explain, because so that in itself will be compromising that security.
So you're saying they're
To
misleading
the
Kenyans?
extent that they are saying they will demonstrate for them, to the extent they are saying that security has been withdrawn, they are misleading Kenyans.
All right. We have heard there from the government spokesperson, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about other security concerns that have emerged, even with the protest going on. But Yvonne, as I bring it back to you, let's listen to what John Mbadi said regarding those protests they may call for if, according to him, security for their principals are not reinstated.
24 hours to return our leaders' security or face mass action right at their doorstep.
All right, so John Mbadi there saying those protests will begin if security is not reinstated. And you've heard from the government spokesperson saying that the NASA leadership is misleading Kenyans, that their security detail is intact with them wherever they move around the country and in their home states. Yvonne.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks for that, Sophia. So I'm here with Opiyo Wandayi, who's the Member of Parliament for Ugunja. You've just heard what the government spokesman has to say. He says there's no scaling back, that the principals are both secure if you go to their homes, and he's talking about these statements being political gimmicks. Your reaction?
I think, firstly, that government spokesman, if it is indeed true that it's a government spokesman, is either not properly informed or is outrightly dishonest. I happen to have been with the Right Honorable Raila Odinga today. And indeed, he did confirm to me, amongst others, that his security detail has been withdrawn. And I also happen to know, because I interact with the Right Honorable Raila Odinga on a very regular basis, I being one of his MPs in Parliament and also being the Secretary for Political Affairs of the party that he leads, that is the ODM. Mm-hmm. So I'm well conversant with a number of things.
So what you're saying is the government spokesman is not being truthful tonight?
I've just said that. It's either not being truthful or is misinformed. One of the two.
Let's talk about security then at the protests today, because today was day one of the protests. You know, do you think you're successful? Do you think your point was made, has gone across? We will listen to the chair of the CEO of IEBC, Chiloba, who says he's not going anywhere.
Before I get to that, Yvonne, I need also to make it clear to Kenyans, of course, that the right to security is not a favor from anyone. It's not a gift that is doled out by those who are in power. It's the duty of the state to protect the lives and property of its citizens. And indeed, security threats do vary from one individual to another. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga is obviously no ordinary Kenyan. Even after fiddling with his votes, after stealing his votes in the August 8 elections, the votes that they gave him, the votes that they purported that he received, were over 6 million after the stealing. Okay? Now, that's not the kind of person you want to treat in a casual manner when it comes to security. But more importantly, as we speak, we are aware that the Supreme Court did annul the purported election of Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta. Mm-hmm. Okay? The Supreme Court itself did annul the purported election of Uhuru Kenyatta. And therefore, we are supposed to be heading to another election.
Yeah.
Okay? Even though it is contentious. Now, that makes the Honorable Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka presidential and deputy presidential candidates.
So, according to you, they deserve the security
they
based on
are
that.
entitled to adequate security.
All right. On that, your point is made. I want us to talk about the protest held today. Do you believe your message has gone across? I'd just like you to respond to Ezra Chiloba, who was interviewed today exclusively by our Sophia Wanuna, who's our lead reporter on The Big Story, saying he's not going anywhere. What are your thoughts to that? And so what next? Today was day one. Do we see day two tomorrow?
Yvonne, I didn't have the opportunity to listen to Ezra Chiloba.
We will play that in just a moment.
Yeah, but if it is true, he said what you are saying he said. I want to tell you, Yvonne, that gentleman is deluding himself. The kind of protection he thinks he's enjoying from the top leadership of Jubilee is protection that is very short-lived.
Okay, hold that thought,
Yes.
because you've brought in Jubilee. We will get Raphael Tuju, who's the Secretary General, in just a moment. But first, I want us to listen to what Ezra Chiloba had to say to us here on KTN News this afternoon.
That I got responsibility before me, and I have to discharge that responsibility. Of course, those who raise concerns, and we can say that people have a right to express themselves, but whatever we do, we must be able to do it within the confines of the law. And given the nature of this office, we've been here before, and we need to learn from the past, even as we look into the future.
Yeah. Your response, Mheshimiwa?
I don't know what past that gentleman is asking Kenyans to learn from. If indeed he means what he's saying, then he should have known by now that if we are to go by the past, then he should be aware that his days in that office are numbered.
You brought in, you talked about...
and I wanted to qualify my statement.
Yes.
In the now famous Supreme Court ruling, it was quite clear that the highest court in the land came to a determination that the August 8th presidential election was bungled, that there were clear irregularities and illegalities that were committed, and they did not need to go further than that.
Okay.
By that very determination, it was clear that there are officers who are responsible for the bungling of the elections, and those officers are headed led by one Ezra Chiloba.
Supreme Court did not find any, criminal culpability, even though that is not within their scope. But I'd like us to listen to Raphael Tuju now, who's joining us also on The Big Story tonight. Thanks for joining us, Raphael. I wonder if you've had a chance to listen to what Opiyo Wandayi has to say. He's talking about Ezra Chiloba enjoying Jubilee protection. I'd like your reaction to that.
Well, I'm glad you've put us in separate studios, because if I was close to him, maybe I would have punched him. How are you, my brother?
Well, I hope you wouldn't have.
I'm fine.
I think Jubilee has not been good. Anyway, I think it's important to appreciate certain things. One of them is that Jubilee has no capacity or capability in law to protect anybody at the IEBC. IEBC people are protected by the law, which means that if you want to remove a commission, if you want to disband that commission, there's a way of disbanding the commission. If you want to have an employee of the commission sacked, there's an act which governs how the commission operates, and they do have the latitude as commissioners to be able to sack the staff that they don't want to have for any reason or another. And it's unfortunate that ODM stroke NASA have got this illusion. They're deluded that they can actually pick and choose who they remove, who they leave, who they put in. The court, the Supreme Court itself, did not even dare to do that because they know what the law is.
You're being extrajudicial with the protests?
You think?
Are you being extrajudicial with the protests? Because that's what he's saying, that you know the law, but you're not following the law to get the officials out if that's what you want.
Our friend Raphael Tuju, speaking from both sides of the mouth, he clearly knows, or he ought to have known, that what we started today, in the form of demonstrations, is perfectly within the law. And we did make it very clear that our intention was not to storm any office to eject any officer. Our intention was to demonstrate and to appeal to the conscience of these officials.
Bwana Opiyo,
yes.
One of the principals of NASA did say, tutaenda huko Jumanne, we will remove them from office, we will eject them from office, we will evict them from office. Well,
I don't want to dwell on rumors, because what came out clearly yesterday was that the Honorable Raila Odinga made it very clearly. Yeah, at least I didn't hear that bit. But the most important thing is that by demonstrating, Kenyans of all walks of life were basically out to show the world that they are not happy with the continued stay in office of these specific officers who failed in their respective dockets and made the 8th August presidential election be scandalized.
All right, let me ask this, because there is a meeting scheduled tomorrow, and I want to put this to you, Raphael. There's a meeting scheduled tomorrow. IEBC is convening between representatives of both sides. Will the Jubilee side be present? Will we have representation at this meeting tomorrow?
Let me answer first of all. Let me comment first of all on some of the things that Honorable Wandai has said, that I'm speaking from both sides of the mouth. I don't know what that means, but at least you accept the fact that one of his principals had said that they'll storm the place and physically remove Mr. Chiloba, which I think is not legal. He denies. He says that he never heard that. He's contradicting what his principal said. I wish him well. But that's unfortunate that he can deny something which one of his principals actually said, and this is in the public domain. They were going to evict those people. To demonstrate, nobody questions your right to demonstrate. That's perfectly legal as long as you do it without causing chaos, without, visiting violence on Kenyans, disrupting them in unreasonable ways. So that we must respect. And that is the Constitution. The only thing which I also want to do at this particular moment in time is to congratulate Mr. Kalonzo Musyoka, Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, and Honorable Davadi. Every time these demonstrations take place, they have never even organized a twig-waving demonstration in Kitui or in Vihiga. At least Wetangula tried in Trans Nzoia. So I must say I admire them for being able to use the poor boys from Kisumu, Homa Bay, and Siaya as the human shield.
Okay, I'd like us to focus on what happens tomorrow, Bwana Tuju. Will you and your representatives of your party be attending this meeting with the IEBC?
Certainly, yes. What happens is that the IEBC is the one which is mandated by the Constitution to conduct the elections. They're like the referee. When the referee summons you for a meeting, it is reasonable to go. You may disagree. You may have certain thoughts, certain differences with them. There are things that we feel strongly about that we'll be able to get the opportunity to address them. They put it in writing. They detailed the things that they want discussed. So we will turn up, and we are not going to get into this infantile behavior of boycotting and saying, unless this and that is done, we are not going to go. We're a little bit more grown up than that.
Okay. Bwana Wandai, will you and your representatives be at that meeting tomorrow?
Well, you know, that is a matter that will be decided by the NASA summit. Up to this evening, there was no word yet from the summit, which I don't sit in, okay? But what I'm aware of is that there is an invite from the IEBC concerning this meeting, even though from where I sit, I am not happy with the agenda as outlined in their invite.
So why not attend the meeting tomorrow and thrash out the issues on the agenda?
I haven't said we shall not attend the meeting. Yeah, as if you are keenly listening to me. I've said that is a determination which will be made by the NASA summit before the meeting tomorrow, before that time for the meeting tomorrow arrives. But then, what must be made very clear again is that even as IEBC is calling for this meeting, it must be understood that NASA did present a raft of conditions. Okay? What we have christened the 9 irreducible minimum conditions.
Okay.
In their responses to us, and in their various circulars to the public, they haven't come any close to meeting those conditions. And therefore, we are very disappointed.
Can I talk about something that the two of you agree on, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, and it's the use of UNDP.
And on what is just...
and it's the use of UNDP with respect to the ballot paper. Mr. Tuju, tonight we're hearing that Jubilee Majority Leader Aden Duale saying they're not happy with the UNDP option. I believe that's the same thing we're hearing from NASA. Could you tell us why?
Well, let me just go back to what he's saying. First of all, I'm very surprised that he says the summit has not decided. I mean, if that is where NASA is, then it's really pathetic, because they went on record and said they will not go. Now they are still meeting, and the summit is deciding whether they'll go or they'll not go. Flip-flopping in the usual way is a pity, but they are on public record that they said they will not go. I'm surprised they're considering that, but if they are, good development. Now, when it comes to what you're asking me about the UNDP and so forth, I've seen that in the papers. I've not had time to deliberate on this with the leader of majority, so I cannot comment until I talk with him tomorrow.
All right. One day, UNDP?
The information we got, at least from the letter from the IEBC to ourselves, was that UNDP had purportedly offered to procure these ballot papers and other ballot materials.
Yeah.
We are not concerned by whoever is procuring. That has never been an issue. Or whoever is paying for the ballot papers. In any case, the Kenya government has not complained of lack of money to procure the ballot papers. We had the cabinet met and approved some money, some 10 billion shillings. And Parliament hasn't declined either. So the question of who is footing the bill is neither here nor there.
Yeah.
What our position has been and still is that we shall not accept the possibility of this discredited company going by the name Al Ghurair printing these ballot papers and other related materials.
So, but do you have categorically a problem with UNDP handling this process?
We are saying that is neither here nor there. Yeah, what we are against is Al Ghurair.
So you wouldn't mind?
We wouldn't mind.
Okay.
It's not our business.
But Al Ghurair is what you are violently opposed to.
We are opposed to Al Ghurair.
Okay, I wanted to talk about these protests because this is certainly not the first time we're seeing anti-IEBC protests. And it would be good to talk about securing the country at this time during the protests and in the run-up to the election. But let me just take you back a little bit. In 2016, to those demos that started in May of 2016, it was 2 days in a week. Mondays and Thursdays lasted over a month. It was famously known as Machozi Mondays. Started out as peaceful protests, but then turned violent at some point, leading to the deaths of 8 people and 30 others being wounded. Now, from the outset, this was what court at the time was saying, that the IEBC could not be trusted to conduct credible elections in 2017. A number of issues had put context to the protests then. Remember, there was what happened in 2013, as well as the just concluded at the time Kericho Senate by-election. Then there was the Chicken Gate scandal. After this, of course, a joint House committee was put together. That's a joint parliamentary select committee, made some of those changes. But here we are again today. Those protests that have started in earnest today. This was day one of those protests by Jubilee. I believe one person was, by NASA, excuse me, I believe one person was injured with respect to that. I'm really hoping at some point we can get to Sophia, our lead reporter, to just speak to Eric Kiraithe, who's a government spokesman, to talk about, you know, the security ahead of this process, this exercise. We know we're talking about securing the elections yet again. Sophia, perhaps we can get to hear from the government spokesman on the protest today. Security, not just for the principals, but for the protests as well, and securing the country ahead of the election.
Thank you, Yvonne. And it's interesting to note conflicting reports from your guest in studio there, as well as the government spokesperson. He did want to reply to what Wandai had to say, because he did say that you either do not know as well or are misleading Kenyans in as far as the VIP protection is concerned.
Without any fear of contradiction, I think the viewers have realized Wandai is not informed and he is misleading Kenyans. And in terms of security, I am an authority. I know what I am talking about. If I can touch briefly, I find myself ill at ease as the government spokesperson to stand here talking about the security of 2 or 3 Kenyans. In terms of demonstration, what I want to tell Kenyans tonight, Sophia, is that the government of Kenya has never had any problem protecting peaceful demonstrators expressing their own opinions. We have had always a quarrel with the criminals assembled with stones. We saw a few today on television with crude weapons, forgetting that people have a right to movement, which they have not delegated to them, forgetting that Kenyans have a right to do business. And I can tell you as a person, I have a big quarrel with politicians who see the natural resource we have in these youthful people. And instead of using it for entrepreneurship, using it for productivity, to make themselves and this country richer, they use it to buy drugs. You could see them to buy kumi and that kind of stuff, and use them to do completely unproductive, primitive things, and to serve their own political purpose. That I have a quarrel with.
That you have a quarrel with. You've talked about young Kenyans who will come out in this protest, some holding stones or whatever. But we've seen in the past election, 8th of August, police using live bullets. And none of these protesters, at least according to the evidence that was presented, or none of it being presented, that there was no real threat at the time. They are referred to as looters, and there is due process for looters, isn't there?
Certainly there is due process for looters. To that extent, you are right.
Yes.
There is a due process for use of firearms, lethal fire. But I'm wondering, if somebody is holding a stone and has hurled 2 or 3 towards you, what kind of measurement you use in terms of human judgment?
Do you shoot them dead? Do you not fire tear gas, use water cannons? Wouldn't that suffice, sir?
We have used those ones generously where need be. We have used a baton charge. We have used, some officers have even used a kick, arm-to-arm combat, when a rioter becomes audacious enough to come very close. But I can assure you, every incident of use of firearm, an inquiry file is opened. We have IPOA. We have very many agencies dealing with this investigation. And the government has never condoned and is not going to condone excessive use of force or malicious use of force. Having said that, if you are going to threaten the life of any person, if Sophia walking to a supermarket is likely to get a stone on her beautiful face, if I am going to have my kiosk broken into, and it is apparent that that is what you intend to do, you had better know you will have broken the laws of this country, you are operating against the constitution of this country, and you therefore lose every right to demand protection for it. However, every criminal will be given his due process, but no criminal will be allowed to commit crimes against people's lives, against property. The law will be applied instantly if need be.
And there are those who disagree with you, sir, respectfully, because a stone and your officers are usually wearing protective gear, and using live bullets on them is not force-to-force kind of retaliation when it comes to protests. But final question before we go to break. The protests we've been seeing, there are those who allege and say the government appears and the police to be heavy-handed when it comes to protesters from NASA. There'll be more security presence, dispersing them will be more violent, as opposed to when protesters gather from the government, from Jubilee supporters.
I think that is becoming very unfair to the National Police Service. I've been a policeman myself. I know the difficulty of dealing with riotous mobs. some of them comprising of intoxicated youth. I hope you are not saying that next time we should supply our policemen with stones so that they can meet stones with stones. That is not really very conventional. But I can assure the country that our police officers are impartial wherever they are. They are busy providing and maintaining order to ensure that as you enjoy your rights, the other person, and the other can also enjoy their rights of movement, their rights to do business, something we need to school our own demonstrators, our own politicians on, because we must tell Kenyan the person selling potatoes by the road is actually engaged in a protective activity. And if you are a Democrat and you are demonstrating for a lawful reason, or you are organizing that demonstration, you will first provide marshals to work with the police, not stones and cannabis.
So there's no double standard?
Not at all.
All right. Thank you very much. Government
Welcome.
spokesperson Eric Kiraithe joining us here on The Big Story, saying no double standard, and the VIPs, at least those in NASA, Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, it is misinformation that their security has been stripped off. Yvonne.
All right, thanks. Opiyo Wandayi is dying to give a comment, but we must take a break. We will come back with his reaction to those statements there by the government spokesman, Eric Kiraithe. Thank you, Sophia. You're watching The Big Story right now, and our big story tonight is all about the protests against the IEBC officials by NASA and their supporters. We'll be right back.